welcome to The Finder of Lost Things, exploring your superpowers of trust, healing and transformation, with me, Hannah Belton. My brother, Christian, disappeared in Mali, Africa in 2003. He disappeared without a trace. We lost his story, we didn't have closure, we lost so much. I was fighting and searching to find Christian when actually I just needed to sit in stillness and attract him in. I was so resistant to doing this, but I had to surrender. It's a process of trusting and finding the lost pieces and integrating them. This podcast will uncover the process that Christian and I went on to find the lost things, him, and to find the parts of me that were missing.
And we were destined from the start to tell our story into the dark, for we were born to a great white shark.
Hello, hi, welcome. Come on in as usual. Come and sit round in a circle. I've got a really special guest for you to meet today. It's been a long time in the making. And this week has been quite trying for both my guest and myself. This episode it's been shown to me as a real completion. I feel really tired. And I feel very emotional. Oh, it's going to come through. I'm just going to have to tell. In fact, I'm going to let my guest today is Chloe Hardy, who is an artist and a poet. And Chloe came to me even before I'd started the podcast and said that she would like to write a poem about Chris and I. She'd seen us on social media somewhere, and she'd been interested in us and wanted to write this poem. And I remember telling Mum and Dad, even before the podcast, I think it was the first time I sort of mentioned the podcast to them, and I said about this lady called she was actually Cleo on social media. She wants to write this poem, and Mum went, "Oh wow, that's amazing! That would be great. You know, that would be really good to have Christian remembered in a poem." And like Chloe's been our sort of #1 fan all through the podcast. She's commented on every episode, and she's really got into it and been asking me lots of questions as well about pinpointing events and what Christian was like, and really sort of getting into the story. And then I'm just going to introduce her to you now because yeah, Chloe needs to tell the story about this, about how she was involved with Christian. And yeah, so you're not actually going to see, if you're watching the film, you're not going to see Chloe today on the screen because she had very little sleep last night. She's quite nervous about being on the screen as well. So you're just going to hear her lovely voice, and she's actually going to read the poem today for us. So I just want to welcome Chloe. Hi, Chloe. Thank you so much for joining us. I know
That's all right.
It's been a week.
It's a pleasure. I've had quite a challenging week, and to say I didn't get much sleep last night is a bit of an understatement. But I'm very enthusiastic to read my poem, regardless of my personal situation. First of all, shall I talk a little bit about how I knew Christian from my younger years? Basically, he was my neighbour's cousins, and I lived in a very, very beautiful area of Sussex, and I was very privileged to have the Veltons as my neighbours, and I spent probably more time with the Veltons in the summer than I did with my own family, and I met Christian quite a few times over afternoon tea, and he made a real impression as a really, really amazing person with a really beautiful vibration to him, and that always stuck in my memory. I I moved further down from where I was living, so I kind of slowly lost contact with your family, and then I went to university, and then I moved up to Scotland after I went to university, and then I didn't really think so much about my time as your neighbours until my mother sent me an article maybe quite a few years ago about Christian going missing, and it really disturbed me at the time, and I think I just kind of shut it out of my mind. I don't even think I kept the article, and I kind of fell out with my mum, so I didn't really even follow it up with her. And after maybe about 10 years of reading that article, and I didn't know any of your story about, I wasn't following it. I just didn't even, I wasn't even aware of it. And then the last winter solstice, I had a dream about Christian, and he visited me, and I actually think it was even, I think I was even in the house that you used to live in, and I went there, and I think I saw him there, and he basically said I needed to get in contact with you. And I thought, well, this is really strange, because I haven't, I haven't heard about whatever happened to him. So I decided that that winter solstice to actually try and chase up what did happen to him. And the thing that I read was your letter of a lifetime, and that was really the main point of contact I had to me, what was clarifying what really happened. And I read that, and I was so unbelievably moved by it that I felt that that a poem had to be written, and I just kind of took it from there, and then I got in contact with you. But I didn't tell you my personal situation of living next to your family until I think it was May the 1st, which was also the time that Christian connected with you in spirit, wasn't it? Which is kind of coincidence.
Yeah, it was the day we found out.
Yeah, I left it a long time because I was a little uncertain about doing it, and I felt a bit uncomfortable about how your family would feel about me, kind of what I was concerned they see me as kind of interfering and what have you. But in fact, it all worked out quite well that I got in contact with you, and I feel that I probably couldn't have continued much longer without telling you about my personal situation, because I was basically very much writing the poem from a situation of having known Christian, and I think it would have been hard for me to have not mentioned that. So I really I really deeply connected with your story, maybe a little bit too much actually, and I was quite disturbed basically by the concept of Chris kind of floating through Africa for so many years, not even aware that he was dead. And that's basically what the essence of what my poem is about. I mean, I feel that now, from what you're saying, Chris has very much moved on from that. He's not, his spirit isn't in Africa anymore, but this poem is specifically about him as a kind of lost soul in Africa, because I felt that was just something that was a very interesting subject poetically, but I don't feel he's there anymore. But I feel that maybe I'm writing not just about him, I'm writing about other lost souls in Africa, and I feel maybe some of them are still there. So I did do some research on the poem. I read some books by I read a book by Mungo Park, and also a book about Mungo Park, and I also referred to the book by Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness, in my poem, because that's kind of about going into the center of Africa and kind of discovering like a darkness there. So I started the poem with a quote from Heart of Darkness because I felt that was kind of quite relevant. So shall I just go ahead and read it?
Yeah, perfect time.
Yeah.
And then we can sort of talk a little bit about the other. It brings up so many themes. So yeah, I'd love to hear it. And I think that's why I'm feeling emotional, like hearing you read it out is going to be. So yeah, the producer better cut the feed on me, because I'll probably be in tears as well.
Right,
So
okay.
yes, please carry on.
I felt it was very much it came through at a very subliminal level. I mean, I could have even had Chris helping me with some of it. You know, I felt it's not something I sat down and consciously wrote. I let it flow from a place that I don't know where it come from. But anyway, I'll start reading it. It's called The Last Journey, an African Adventure. And the tranquil waterway leading to the uttermost ends of the earth flowed sombre under an overcast sky, seemed to lead into the heart of an immense darkness. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. The explorer awoke at the edge of dawn as the globe stretched out before him, his path carved into the abyss with the grace and precision of a razor blade. A map, a river, a continent merged into one infinite swirling dream that flows like blood through the veins, a vision as sharp as an arrowhead. Africa, a land of scorched desires. Africa, a land of dangerous secrets. Africa, a land of ancient truths. Africa, the gate to the spirit world. Follow the ancient snake. It flows its watery tail across the land and descends into the kingdom of Hades far below. Follow the snake into the heart of darkness. The river meanders seductively and silently towards its undefinable source, a mysterious place unknown to man, yet traversed oft by the ancient ones. The spirits of the dead roam the land freely. Beyond borders, they shapeshift across the sacred terrains, invisible beings, yet seen in fleeting glances. They become the sacred watchers of the dawn, at the edge of time and space. They dwell alongside the ancestors, the keepers of eternal truths. The path is fast, the path is slow, the way is narrow, on the journey we go. The path is forwards, the path is back, the way is wide, follow the track. The lion roars, the zebra growls. The lion roars, the leopard growls, the zebra runs, the hyena howls. Onwards, outwards, gainst setting sun. The red earth bleeds, our journey must be done. The spirits dwell in the shadowlands, where the dead travel fast, for they have no mortal need of map or compass to guide them. Dwelling in the liminal zones beyond time and space, they inhabit the realms in between, shapeshifters of the sandy dunes. Lost on desert storms they dance, like grains of sand they roam the land for love to set them free. And I have an afternote to Chris, which says, in trying to solve an enigma, you became one. You went in search of answers to riddles, but instead the great mystery found you in the land of Africa, your passage to eternity.
Thank you, Chloe.
I just wanted to say that one of the key things that is about this poem is you mentioned that Chris was seen in various places around Africa where he shouldn't have been, you know, quite away from where he should have been. And I was thinking to myself, and this is only kind of like almost just an imaginative idea, were they seeing his ghost? And that's one of the key things about the poem that I was writing, is that this idea of him kind of as a spirit shape-shifting across Africa, and these reports that were given of him around, was that the invisible beings yet seen in fleeting glances. And that's one thing that really kind of came to my mind when I was reading about that. So I just thought you might be interested to know that about it.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I think what Chloe's referencing, so we kind of went over all the way to Kenya looking for Chris on the social media search, but actually we had sort of people saying they'd seen him, but there was nothing concrete. But actually, this is so interesting. This is a completion part as well, Chloe. Thank you for bringing this up.
That's all right.
So there was a lady who got in touch with me, and she had said she'd been following the social media search. I've just remembered this. And she said to me, much like yourself, Chloe, hung around in the background for ages, and she was like, oh, I don't know whether to say anything. I don't know whether to say anything. And eventually she came forward and she said, do you know what? I really feel I've seen Chris. And she had, have you got the details there? You probably have on your research.
No, I haven't.
She said, she basically came very gingerly forwards to me and said, look, I know you're looking in Kenya, but I really feel I've seen your brother in Ghana, which is actually below Mali, which is totally plausible at the time for us. And I said, oh, what did you sort of see? How did you know? And she said, well, I was with my husband, who was a footballer from Scotland. Yeah. Or was he from Denmark or somewhere? Who they lived like 20 minutes away from where Mungo Park was born. And they were in Ghana because he was playing for the Ghanaian team. So they were sitting at traffic lights. And this she said to me, it was like a vision of a tramp who looked very much like Christian. She'd seen pictures of Chris, and she said it looked just like Christian, but like he'd just come out of hospital. He was absolutely bone thin with bruising on him, and he was very confused about where, oh my God, I've got chills. He was so confused. Oh God, it's gonna make me cry. He was so confused about where he was. He knew he was I can't get the details right. He knew he thought he was from France, and he couldn't quite work out how to get home. He was wanting money. He was collecting money from the people at the traffic lights, wanting money to get on a plane to go home. And she said to him, where do you live? And he said, I think I live in France, but I'm not sure. Sorry. And anyway, she said, what's your name? Who are you? And he said, I'm Christian. And she thought he meant, I'm a Christian. Right. As in religion. Yeah. But he said to her, I'm Christian. And then she was only with him for about 30 seconds or so, but she gave him some money, and and then the traffic lights and everyone was beeping, so she went off. And she actually went back to the area and tried to find him and never saw him again. And she was so upset because she was so sure it was Christian. And she said he had a broken nose like Chris has in photos, and he spoke with she said it was like a really posh English accent. Yeah. Oh, Chloe, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to have to put more details in the show notes about that, the exact, because I did write about it. But yeah, that was Chris wandering around in Africa. And this girl had seen it. And I know we talk about there's so many different ghosts in Africa. I mean, obviously there was Mungo Park, who lost his life in would you run on your research? Do you know kind of what happened to him in the end? And
I've got the book by me, but my attention to detail is not at its greatest right now. I did study it, and I kind of underlined some significant points. What was it saying?
It was in the river, wasn't it? I think he was.
There's here, got one bit underlined. It says 10 years after the catastrophe of Park's expedition, another attempt was made, aiming to test the Congo theory by simultaneous approaches from the Gambia and the mouth of the Congo. That's just something I've underlined, though. I don't know if it's of any.
Yeah, I think.
There's no record of. There was no record of anybody's. Oh no, sorry. That's yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I think it was kind of left in the air. There was all sorts of ideas about what had happened to him, and that he was on the river, and he was trying to make contact with some locals, and they thought he was threatening them, and they killed him, and he was in the rapids. And I know, so he's kind of left this is why Christian followed him, because he is this sort of enigma, isn't he? This sort of
I've got this very interesting bit here that actually I've noted next to it, like with Chris. So I'm going to read this out to you.
Yeah.
It says, some of the stories must be discounted as wild rumours or even gross inventions, and there were suspiciously numerous claims to have been eyewitnesses. The rumours were followed by more credible accounts, but later reports are less reliable. This is about what happened to him. The result cannot be clear and definite. It's more like an early cinematograph film in a mutilated state, with gaps in places fuzzy and sometimes open to alternative interpretations. That's basically about what happened to him and people seeing him. So it's just, it sounds very similar to Chris.
Yeah. I mean, this is why it was so important for me to find the story, because there were so many gaps. It was so frustrating that I didn't know what had happened to him. And even so it would happen to Mungo, and then Mungo's son went out to try and find out what had happened to him, and he also died. And my big thing was that I did not want my children to have to go out to Africa to go and find out what had happened to their uncle. And it was so down to me in the end to find out what had happened to him. And I know you talked to your dad about coming on the podcast, and he said, has there ever been any proof about what Hannah's saying about what happened to Chris? And there isn't, because I can't prove it. One day I hope to have the photographs of him in my hands that will have been retrieved from Africa. We've talked about that all the time. But it doesn't matter to me if anybody believes me or not. Because it's how we've healed and transformed. And and I must say, because Chris, do you mind telling the story about your recent sort of Chris coming back into your life? Because I know he's still around, isn't he?
Or do
you want to talk about something else?
I don't want to discuss the recent thing.
Okay.
No, not that, because that's too delicate for me.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about that issue, but not the exact example, if you don't mind.
Okay, that's fine. Was there anything else you wanted to talk to about the poem?
No, but I did there was something I wanted to say just then, and then it suddenly went about proof.
Oh yeah.
Just because you can't prove something doesn't mean it isn't true. Because basically to say that, this is why me and my dad have quite a few arguments. The scientific point of view is basically things only exist if you can prove them. But I think humans probably only perceive about 20% of what really exists. I mean, all the stuff with dark matter, even science itself is, quantum physics is itself proving that actually we really don't know anything, and that the universe is this kind of massive unknown stuff that we don't even have the skills to understand. So I think this idea of just because you can't prove something is extremely arrogant, because it suggests that humans do have the ability to fully prove things. Well, we don't. There's a lot of things that are unknown that we can't prove because it's beyond our capacity to be able to prove even. We can't prove life after death because it's something that is beyond, you can't prove it.
Yeah, we've got sort of people coming back after near-death experiences with their stories.
Yeah, I mean, that's I suppose that's kind of proof, but you can't quantify something like that, really.
But just something we were talking about actually before, we had a pet loss specialist on called Karen Anderson, who came on a few episodes ago, and we were talking about it was something that we didn't have time to fit into the episode, but I think it will fit in here perfectly actually, because we all along, Chris and I, thought he was still alive. And obviously he was dead, but the woman seeing, if we say that woman saw his ghost, but Karen was telling, I don't know if I told you the story, Chloe, but this Karen was telling me about an experience. So she's a psychic but speaks with animals, and she had a parents actually who came to her and said, look, we've our son called Matt has lost his golden Labrador called Molly, and they'd been out hiking in the Colorado mountains, and they got separated, and they couldn't find the dog anywhere, and they called Karen and said, look, do you think you can come and contact in with Molly's soul and see if you can work out where she is in the wilderness. So Karen thought, well, I'll give it a go. Anyway, Molly kind of came bounding up to her when she connected with her, and Molly was okay. She was fine, and she was saying, like, she was upset because she was separated from Matt. But she said, look, I'm, Karen was sure she was alive. And then Karen said to her, can you describe where you are? And Molly said, I'm on an area where the tree line ends and the exposed rock sort of begins. And she could see a river. She was above the raging sort of river. So Karen sort of passed on this information. And then after a couple of days, Molly was found washed up on the river, and she was dead. And the thing with Karen and with us was Molly was absolutely convinced that she was still alive.
Yeah.
And she had obviously jumped into the river she got separated and had jumped into the river to follow Matt's scent across the river.
Yeah.
And she was still earthbound and hadn't realized.
Right.
Like,
I see. Right.
I told Karen this, and she went, oh, thank goodness, because she'd never heard of it. Like, it was a confirmation, I guess. So I think the more we talk about this happening, the more it's a possibility. And the thing is, and I love that last line you said about for love to set them free.
Yeah.
Because that is all Chris and I have done. It's like follow that thread of love and set him free from where he was. But
and one thing that's really interesting, I'm actually watching Twin Peaks at the moment. I'm getting to the end bit, and it's very interesting because there's Agent Dale Cooper says that there's two gates. There's the love that opens the door to the White Lodge, and fear that opens the door to the Black Lodge. And I'm very interested in that concept because basically that is pretty much how it is that you've got love on one end and you've got fear on another end. And I think if you get caught up in fear, you end up kind of entering that Black Lodge. And I mean, I've kind of like, we were talking about the psychic phone lines. I think if you get slightly addicted and obsessed with them, you're really just kind of playing with your fears, really, aren't you, rather than that I think a lot of these psychic phone lines prey on people's fears, and they make money on people's fears.
I mean, I think we were talking about I've talked openly before about the search for Chris and how it affected me. It was like an obsession, and it was I completely gave my power away. If I'd known what I could do and did do, I'd have never have given my power away to anybody. But you learn as you go along, don't you? And the fact that we have this love that is connected to people who we've met, and that continues, that stays. It doesn't disappear. It just carries on. And and to use that love and that unconditional. I mean, Chris and I had to work out, our differences. It wasn't an easy healing journey at all. But once you'd got the sort of gunk, I mean, I've talked about this lots of times, but once I'd kind of got the gunk out of the way of our relationship,
the fear, love, basically, fear. Yeah.
The fear and the mistrust.
Yeah.
And it's like trusting yourself. When you can trust yourself, you trust the other person, and you trust what's happening. Like, giving your power away to people who don't even know you. Yeah. And that's a whole story, isn't it? But and we were talking, if you don't mind, sort of also talking about, I know what we need to talk about Mungo's sister.
All right, yeah.
Do you want to tell the story? Because that was in your research.
I'll let you tell it because I'll let you tell that one.
Okay, so there was so we had so actually over our journey we had quite a few relatives of Mungo Park who got in touch with us, and sort of said, you know, that they were thinking of us. Obviously, Mungo's trip and the exploration that he did, and being the sort of the romance around it, had very much followed down in the family. And one of the relatives had sort of said to me, look, I wished I'd done the same trip, because, you know, I'd always wanted to when I was younger, because it was some, you know, great relative. But he shared with me a story about Mungo's sister, and I can't remember her name. It was Mrs. something. I think she was I think her husband was worked with Mungo. Anyway, they'd not heard from Mungo for a very long time, and thought he was you know, not coming home, or was certainly lost. And she actually in her dream, or in a vision, she actually heard like a carriage pull up outside the house, and she, in her heart, she was like, oh my god, that's Mungo home, you know, he's coming home. And she actually saw him like come into the room, and I think she was probably in a sort of that half state of the liminal state. And he said, you know, she said, oh my goodness, you're home, you've come home. He was like in his normal explorer sort of costume. And then she, looking back at it, she suddenly realized, he's dead. This is him coming to, you know, it was her realization that her brother had died. And I can't remember, I mean, I haven't really looked back in my diaries, but in that sort of rough time when I believe Christian died, I don't think I had a similar thing, or if I did, I blocked it out and like, I don't want to hear that. But there was definitely, so Mungo Park's sister had that pre-death recognition, or death recognition.
Actually, I had just talking about the experiences I had of losing people. I actually had two experiences like that with the people who died in my life. I had to, like, is it called precognition? Is that what it's called?
I think so, precognition.
I had that with them. If you want me to tell you what exactly went on.
Yes, please do. I think it was really well. I think last week Sophia kind of had a recognition of her brother dying as well. So yeah, please do. Please tell us the stories.
It wasn't exactly a recognition, but it was something. It was something kind of related to that. I had three very close friends die. Well, two of them were ex-boyfriends, and one of them was a best friend. And I had them die within a space of about 3-4 years. So I had 4 years of like very, very intensified grief that every year just seemed to be getting worse and worse and worse. And all of the experiences, I had very kind of like precognition, kind of strange things, strange dreams. The first one was with my friend Steve. Is that I was flying back from London, and I was flying over Edinburgh. He was in Edinburgh at the time. We hadn't spoken for quite a few months. I'm aware now that the pretty much the exact time that the flight was going over Edinburgh was also the exact time that he died, because I found that out eventually. But as the plane was flying over Edinburgh, I got the most unbelievable headache. But it wasn't a headache. It was like my brain was actually going to. It was like a migraine that was so intense that I couldn't even open my eyes, and it lasted for about 5 minutes, and it was like someone kind of slowly crushing my head. Oof. And I thought, this is very strange. I've never had anything like this before, and I had to like literally put my head in between my legs, and just I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, and I've never had it in my life. And I've since found out that I experienced that pretty much the same time as Steve died. That I thought that was quite strange. But what was really strange is that when I did find out he died, I had a dream about him, and basically I was on the phone, and I picked up the phone, and Steve was at the other end of the phone, and he basically told me that he loved me. And then he put the phone down. And when I woke up, I was in a state of like extreme bliss. Like it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like something that was more than a dream. And I later spoke to a psychic about it, not a phone psychic, someone at a psychic fair, and she said to me that that had been Steve. Actually, that was like his last message to me, and that he was using the phone because we'd used phones quite a lot. And that was my experience with Steve. And my experience with my other friend dying was really, really strange, because I was at a festival in Spain, and again I didn't realize that my ex-boyfriend died the day that this event happened. But basically, first of all, he had dreadlocks a little bit like me, and I'd actually tied one of his dreadlocks onto one of mine, and it'd been there for many, many, many years. And it fell off at the festival, and I thought, oh, that's strange. His dreadlock's fallen off, and I just kind of kept it in my pocket for the night. And then I was talking with some friends, and one of my really good friends, I kind of suddenly went into like a kind of trance-like state, and everything around me went into a daze, kind of very fuzzy. And my best friend's face actually transformed for like about 5 seconds into the face of the man that died. And I thought, well, that's really, really strange that that's happened, because the dreadlock also fell out as well. And when I got back from Spain, I found out that the night all of that went on was the night that he died, which was really strange. But I didn't find that out till about 2 months later. And I thought that was just very kind of just very strange. I mean, you can't really explain anything that, like, it was very obscure and very strange, but it was just a coincidence, a paranormal coincidence. I think Carl Jung writes about paranormal coincidences, that those things happened, at the exact times that those people died. And the last strange story that I have is my friend James, who died, and funnily enough, he died on the exact date that the other man died, which was 23rd of August, which was kind of disturbing. And I basically got a dream about him, very similar to the dream that I had about Steve, where Steve was on the telephone. And I had a dream, and he came to me in the dream, and he told me how he died. And the family were trying to hide how he really died, because it was a bit of a taboo subject. And they were posting all over Facebook like a different thing of how he died. But James, I met James in this dream. It was very, very clearly him. It wasn't a dream. It was like more like a vision. And I got in contact with his girlfriend the next day, and I said, this is a lie, what you're saying on Facebook, isn't it? He didn't die like that at all. And she said to me, well, how did you know? You're not supposed to know that. And I told her about the dream I had, and she said, well, don't tell anyone, will you, for goodness sake? So those are my just slightly strange kind of experiences of my friends' deaths. So
did these sort of things that happened to you, did they make you feel, was grief easier having these experiences, or?
Well, certainly the dreams, like Steve visiting me in the dream and telling me he loved me, that was one of the most amazing experiences I ever had, because I just woke up feeling this real sense of love and bliss around me. That was a very positive experience. James, that was also I think they were all a good experience, actually. The one where I saw the image of that man who died in my friend's face was a bit spooky. And it was also spooky because I'd written a letter to his sister, and apparently he read the letter, and he died half an hour after he'd read my letter. So we obviously had quite a connection when he died, Actually, funnily enough, he was friends with Steve, and I actually told this man that Steve was in spirit, and I told him that in the letter, and he died half an hour after he read that letter. So I feel that because he knew his friend was in spirit, he was able to go himself. So I felt that the reason I wrote him this letter was to kind of like set him free and say, well, it's okay, Steve's gone, you can go and jam and play guitar with Steve. You know?
Yeah.
So I felt I did a real service to him in that sense, just letting him know that there's someone there for you on the other side. So all the three deaths I felt were kind of really linked. I mean, partly because two of them actually knew each other, and the other two, you know, that they were born on the same birthday and they both died on the same day and they didn't know each other. It was just really bizarre.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I'm sure there's people listening to this, and I would have listened to this as well, probably a few years ago, and just thought, well, this is just scary. This is, you know, this is just weird, and I don't want anything like this happening to me.
Yeah.
And that was a real fear for me around getting involved with spirit, and it's because it is a, you know, it's an unknown, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
But I think once you know that the love, like you keep saying, that's like the fear over the love. Once the love breaks through, love can do anything, can't it?
I've got no fear. I had no fear over any of the experiences at all, but I had the experiences very much thrown upon me. I didn't have any choice in the matter. It's not like I went looking for it. I had to deal with it, whether I liked it or not. So, but I felt all three experiences came from a place of love, not from fear. And all three men, I mean, two of them were ex-boyfriends, and I had, unfortunately, didn't leave on good terms with either of them. But the experience that I had with them after they died means that I managed to release all the, you know, resentment and negativity that I'd had to them in life. And there was this like total liberation and kind of like a weight being lifted on my shoulders after I had that experience. Because sometimes you can be bitter with ex-boyfriends for quite a few years. I didn't have any of that. I was just like, right, I just feel just pure unconditional love to these people now. And that was very, it was like, you know, it was very liberating.
Yeah, and I'm interested. I've just written down a few notes as you were talking. Chris and I, like the way we were shown to communicate with each other, the metaphor that we were given, so from our guide outside, was a phone line. Like you literally have a connection from your hearts, you know, your hearts, and you just have to literally get a clear telephone line, and you can hear each other and feel each other.
I actually did a bit of research on the telephone metaphor after I had that experience, and I actually read myself that it's actually quite a common thing for, there's many stories of people that have died, and after they've died, a relative has picked up the phone and they've been on the other end of the phone, and it's a very, it's more common than people would like to admit. And the phone is like a symbol of communication with the spirit world as well as the material world. You know,
absolutely. And on the other thing you mentioned, that was about the way the dreadlock that you shared.
Well, it was his dreadlock. I tied it onto my hair, and I always knew it was his because his was like darker than mine, and it just kind of fell off. And it was amazing that I even saw it because it was dark when it fell off. I shouldn't have seen it. Like, as soon as it fell off, I was like, something's happened here.
Because I'm only saying that because when Chris was, the last time I saw Chris actually, so 2003 February, I gave him a present, and it was I thought, what am I going to give him to go off traveling, you know, something small. But I went to a bookshop and I found one of those really small survival guides, like Explorer's Survival Guide, like pocket handbook. It was tiny. And I said to him, look, I don't know if I felt that he needed this book, and I said to him, you know, I don't know if you can fit it in your backpack, because all he took was like a rucksack.
That's unbelievable. And not even a phone.
A tent. No, didn't have a phone, didn't have a GPS, none of that. Just had a stills camera and a film camera. But
that's really amazing.
I've never found the book that I gave him amongst his belongings. So I think he took the book that I gave him. So he had something from me that he took with him to Africa. And that's still in Africa. and I don't know where that is, but the connection, because we had that object between us connected.
Yeah.
When I did the trance medium sessions with Chris, which are all on my YouTube channel, the Finder of Lost Things, I think that in part was why we had such a good connection while he was in Africa, because I could see everything that was going on with him. I mean, I could be him and see exactly what was going on. And I was, even before telling the story, I was able to reach him in dreams, like obviously lucid dreaming. And he was always, and even when he, like after he'd been attacked, and just before he was being attacked, actually, in Kita, Kita in Mali, that's important, I put this in, he was aware of me being there with him, like Soul Hannah had gone with him. And I was telling him, like, don't be scared, you're a boxer, you'll be fine, just take whatever they're going to give you and you'll be fine. And I was like giving him a pep talk, and all of this came through in the trance mediumship. So I couldn't be aware of doing that, but my soul was helping him at the time.
I think that's possibly the situation that I had with seeing Robert's face in my friend. Is I actually think that, because he pretty much died that night, it might have even been the moment he died, I think his spirit may have actually kind of come over to Spain, and for that flash second I felt, when I saw him, I felt it was saying goodbye. And it was a very flash thing, very, very quickly. And then it just went back to my normal friend's face. It was a very, very good friend of mine. So, I mean, they picked that person for a reason. But it was like a flash to say goodbye. And then it was gone. I think he kind of like traveled in spirit all the way over to Spain to do that.
Well, the thing is, once they're out of their physical body,
you can do it. That's it.
You're free. And actually, next week's show, we haven't quite finished yet, but I might as well just say, next week's show, we're actually going to be talking to a end of life it's like, I would call her a death doula, but she comes as a end of life care. She's been working in cancer care for 18 years, and she's going to tell us all about like what she's experienced of the moment of death. And
so this is quite a good kind of lead up towards that then, isn't it? Because this is kind of what I'm saying is all kind of like about life after death. This goes on well with the next episode, which will be our penultimate one. Which is like the last one, because that's you can't go any further after that, because you've reached the
and then we've reached the end of it. And then the last actual show is going to be like a roundup of everything that's been going on in the last 6 months, which this episode here is the last like little bow for Chris and I, our story. So thank you. It's funny that you've kind of shadowed this whole podcast. Do you feel you've taken on anything from us, like from Chris and I?
Impacted
you?
Yes, I do feel that I have. I feel that I've taken on your desire to find out the truth of a situation in my own personal circumstances. And I'm not going to go into it, but you know what it is, because we spoke about it earlier. I have been locked in a kind of web of like duplicity and confusion and uncertainty. And it wasn't until the recent situation where I said Chris and Steve were involved in a situation where I actually felt I'd got to the truth. And I felt I'd got to the truth through spirit rather than through kind of chasing psychics that can or cannot be wrong. What my conclusion was is basically that the dead never lie, but psychics can lie. And that's a fact. But the dead, you can always trust the dead. Don't always trust psychics. There's some the thing is, they're not psychics. There's a lot of people out there who claim they are psychic and they're not. They're just trying to earn money. There are some obviously many genuine psychics, but I think the key is into you trust spirits, and that's what kind of my poem is about. You can trust spirits, but be very careful who you trust with regards to people pointing you in certain directions, because sometimes they're just sent to like give you false signposts.
Yeah, but it's funny, isn't it? Because without those false, I've kind of come to the conclusion as well that without those false signposts and that false hope, I would have never, ever, ever have done this journey. There was no way on earth I would have like got so obsessed with finding Chris if somebody hadn't been telling me, you know, he's alive, you're going to get hold of him in the end. Like, I wouldn't have done any of this. And then Chris not being told that he was actually dead or not realizing, that kept the whole thing going. We have, like, our whole journey has been a spiritual growth. You know, and I do believe, I wrote a post today actually on Facebook, I do believe that Chris and I had a predetermined sacred contract before we came into this life that we were going to do this. And everything, like literally everything that has happened caused me to completely break up and realize that I had, the only thing that I had was myself, and I had to get myself better and balanced and find my power, inner power, self-love, and then use my abilities, which we're all psychic, we're all intuitive. It's how much you want to open up to it and allow it in. But without crashing, I would have never done any of this. And now we're able, and you as well, Chloe, you know, the experiences we've had, even by talking about this and letting this out, because people don't talk about this, you know, even by talking about it, other people will go, oh, do you know what, something strange happened to me and I didn't believe it. You know, I thought it was just coincidence, but actually the more we talk about it,
is there?
The more we talk about it, the more we talk about it, the more people, it becomes normalized, and the spirits can, you know, we're all going to be spirits. We all are
absolutely
spirits. We don't want to get to the end and be trying to talk to our loved ones and they're going, oh no, I don't want to listen, I don't want to, you know, like, I'm trying to tell you the story here, I'm trying to give you love, I'm trying to, and they're like, no, I don't want to, it's too scary. But like, that's really fear, is opening up love, isn't it?
Fear blocking it out, isn't it? I mean, I think the reason my dad gets so freaked out by all this is because he's just terrified of it.
Well, I think I know lots of people like that, and I was one. You know, I've already said openly before, the first time I met somebody who was even slightly woo-woo, if we want to call it that, I was like terrified. I didn't even want to go anywhere near her house. You know, but I did, and that was the first, you know, I was sent these people, and people listening now will be going, you know, they'll be listening to us and go, oh, okay, maybe it's not quite so scary. And you know, there is love, there's so much love. And like you said, the last bit of your poem about
well, actually, I've got a confession to make on the last 3 lines. I wasn't going to say, but since I've spoken about him, I will. The last lines, like grains of sand, they roam the land for love to set them free, isn't actually my words. It's actually Robert's words, who died. And I said that I saw him in Spain. He actually wrote a poem to me, and I ripped the poem up when we broke up. And I tried to then, when I many years later, I tried to remember the poem in my head because it was really, really beautiful. But the only lines that I remembered was the last 3 lines, and they've stuck in my mind for like years and years and years. And when I was writing that poem, and it was after you showed me the picture of Chris in the desert, those last 3 lines actually came up, and I had to put them on. So they're not actually mine, they're actually his. And I shouldn't really be saying that, but I do have to commend someone in spirit has written those. And someone in spirit wrote those last 3 lines.
Oh, well, thank you, Robert. And thank you to Chloe. Like, courageous Chloe, thank you so much for joining us, and
that's all right,
for telling us, and for that beautiful poem, and for like keeping me in the dark really about who you were for so long.
Sorry about that.
No, but exactly, that's the whole point, because it would have completely spoiled it if I'd dug to find out who you were, or like you really do in life. If you're given stuff, it happens for a reason at the right time, and you are given as much as you need to know.
Exactly. I didn't want to overload it on you because I was actually worried that it would upset you, so I wanted to wait my time, and I felt that that Beltane was perfect because that's also when Chris had reconnected with you, so I thought I'm going to wait until then, and then that's like the right moment. So it
was funny. I thought it was going to be when you said, "Oh, you'd known Chris before." I remember like being honest here. I thought, "Oh no, what? Oh no, what is it? What is it?" You know, thinking of these things. Oh God, what could you have done? And then it turns out I should add, you and Chris, when you met, you were what, 10?
Actually, I was neighbours with them between the ages of about 8 to 16. No, 9 to 16 or something like that. I mean, I was wait there, hang on. No.
And I never met you. That's the thing. I never met you.
My first school. It was about 10 to 16. I was neighbours with you. But yes, you were the only member of the family that I didn't meet. But I think my dad's met you. I think my dad went over to your house quite a few times and did work for your dad.
Oh,
so I think he's met you, but you were the only person that I never met. Just really strange.
But you see, that's the thread, isn't it? You have to go back, and we're going to be talking about this a lot in the last episode. But like, you have to go back so far to see the thread where it begins.
Yeah.
And for us, for this story, like we've got 30 seconds, but for this story, we are literally at the conclusion of this story, Chloe, and we have to reach back to like when we were 8 years old to understand the
crazy, isn't it? It's crazy.
And how this web has been weaved. But I am so glad you came on, Chloe. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, you've been a joy, and I hope everyone enjoyed that and it opened their eyes a little bit. So yes, next week we have Louise, who I would call her a death doula. I know she's been called that before, but anyway, I look forward to next week, and I have to have a sigh of relief because this was making me nervous, this show, but I'm so glad it's out in the open. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Finder of Lost Things. I think we've been triggered so long and so hard by COVID, and it's going to carry on. People are getting used to stillness, and they're getting used to more solitude, but how do you use that time for the highest good? This process that we're going to explore will bring back the joy and purpose to life. That wholeness, you know, that sort of harmony and flow and togetherness. People are really ready to find their lost parts now. You can find me at hannahvelton.online.
Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its management, or advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.